the lack of self-control is also something that promotes these types of behaviors. You have to be able to sit down with the word and with the professional and confess and admit that I need help. So that's kind of like going into treatment. And I don't want to go that far yet, but I wanted to get us prepared to really think about how we feel about unauthorized sex. And this is what we say sometimes. We say, well, you know, it's not me. I don't mind. That's not, love is love. That's not my business. It is your business because we're a community. And what affects one house will eventually come to your house. From the White House to your neighbor's house to the church house, back to your house. And it's just circulates. And we're all touched by one another's choices. And we all experience one another's choices. When someone is being sex trafficked, or someone is being raped, that's the result of a different morality system and someone deciding that there's no such thing as unauthorized sex. All things are lawful. All things are lawful. And I can do whatever I want. But we get to protect ourselves, educate ourselves, and arm ourselves with the truth of sexuality and sex for marriage, and just campaign on that. Just campaign on that. See, sometimes we don't want to campaign on that because we're not willing to commit to sex in marriage. So we won't ride hard for that. But then when children are molested, we get offended. But if we would really, as a community, raise our voices and just promote sex within the confines of marriage, then that would reduce a lot of the abuse and a lot of the other problems. Our challenge today is that women are going longer without being married, and men are too. And a lot of it is that they don't value sex, or they're participating in unauthorized sex. And when they do participate, maybe there's a baby that comes out of it. And now we have a single parent situation. That's another fallout. And among African Americans, we are leading the way. Not saying that we're having more sex than anyone, but we're having more unprotected sex, and we're having more instances of disease and single parenting issues. We're the least likely to get married. And then when we do get married, we're more likely to get divorced. So we really have to look at how are we going to control this sexual appetite that is the forest sexual appetite. That is going to be a question that I want everyone to hold themselves accountable and to begin to look at the benefits of doing things God's way, because God intended for there to be intimacy. If you are married and you lack intimacy, meaning that disclosure of emotional closeness and, I see you, you see my vulnerable parts, I'm willing to show you me, and you're willing to show you, and we're honest, and we're, walking in integrity together, somewhere down the line, there is a break. And that break of intimacy is most likely been created through sexual trauma. Nothing touches the sexual trauma pain button or irritability or sensitive spot like marriage. Marriage will expose your sexual trauma. It will expose how you were taught to join in intimacy and companionship and pleasure. What were you taught? How were you taught? Marriage touches that, you all. Marriage exposes that. And the conversations that need to be had is about your sexual history, about your sexual trauma, so that you don't personalize rejection, if that comes across, so that you won't personalize if someone is a little more hypersexual than you are, so that you can communicate why you are hyposexual and you're really fighting to enjoy sexuality and that you're not using the world's script. The world's forest ingredients won't work for the garden. The world's forest ideology on unauthorized sex with minors or with anyone, it won't work in the garden. You will never get garden results. You will always get chaos. You will always get pain, and you will always get just forms of death, whether it's death of self-esteem, whether it's death of your mental health, whether it's death of a relationship, whether it's death of connection with yourself because you feel so dirty and so nasty. Those are the things that we have to be able to confront and come face to face with and have that conversation in the church over the pulpit. Our people need to understand, although it's not your fault you're this way, it's your responsibility to relearn sex the garden way and begin the process of healing. And you are not healing alone. You are healing in a community because there's millions of people who have unfortunately had a negative sexual encounter of sexual assault or sexual molestation as a child. It's a very too common thing that we need to discuss and be serious about educating people and letting people know that people grow up with their memory and they can report you. And we don't want to over villainize the people who may have been the perpetrators. But the perpetrator needs to know as well. We understand that you have a messed up love map, and we understand that your activity is being influenced and inflated. Your pain is being pimped by Satan, and he's using you to execute pain in the earth and to continue to perpetuate a legacy of perversion. We understand that. But at some point, you get to decide that you no longer want to be a perpetrator, and you don't no longer want to be the hands and the feet and the object of Satan to harm other people. When you understand that you can change and reroute and live a life in the garden, then that can motivate you to look to God for God's plan for sex. In closing, God's plan for sex is between a male and a female, an Adam and an Eve in marriage. And then his plan is that you grow closer, you become one. And then his plan is that you enjoy one another, the intimacy of one another, and that you enjoy the pleasure of one another, and that you come together and make a child or procreate. That is God's plan. Everything else is Satan's plan. Can you embrace that? Are you walking out Satan's plan, or are you walking out God's plan? As in the garden, we know there's safety in walking out God's plan. There's no guilt. There's no mental anguish. There's no need for drug addiction, coping, and dealing with shame and guilt, toxic shame and guilt. You don't need that when you're in the garden, when you are functioning under the guide of God's will for sex. It's not too late. It's not too late. Again, in our hearts, we have Eden. So there is an innocent part in your life and in your mind, I should say. And all you have to do is go back to Eden, go back to God's original plan for your healing, for your deliverance. Because when you repent, that just means you go back to God's original plan. You change your mind. You shift from the forest ideology, which is your flesh, to your spirit, to God's spirit ideology, which is the garden. And once you do that, you will be in a position to start the healing process. So I gave you a little bit of everything today as we talked about the impact of unauthorized sex. I hope that you're beginning to think about it and contemplate doing things God's way. doing things, God, prevention. And they say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Some of us, some of you did it the wrong way. And now you're having to seek healing for the sexual trauma. Perhaps some of you listening did not. And so this could motivate you to stay in the garden, stay on God's plan for sexuality. Stay there, not in a proud way or braggadocious, but in a way of thanks and gratitude that God is keeping you, right? And for those who have been traumatized, there is hope and there is help and there is healing. He was wounded for our transgression and transgressions with an S. And by his stripes, we are healed. He came for the brokenhearted. And that is what happens when you are traumatized or when you are abused or assaulted, sexually assaulted. Our brains we were made in love and we were not made to be abused. But he is able to heal the brokenhearted. He can bring all our pieces back together again. We win. And that's why the scriptures declare all things work together for good to them that love God and are called according to his purpose. So we win. He takes our pain. Our pain has an assignment, and it's not dictated by the enemy. The enemy has a plan for our pain, but God has an assignment. He didn't cause the pain, but he has an assignment for our pain. Our pain has an assignment. He has a purpose for it, and he wants it to work something in us that is good. The enemy meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And we can recover, and we can be like David, who stated that he will teach sinners the way. When he asked for forgiveness, he said, I'll teach sinners the way. I will tell people why sex in the garden is more profitable than sex in the forest. I will tell people why sex in the garden is optimum, is pleasurable, it is life, it is filled with goodness. We have to make sex safe again in marriages, and just even in marriages. Make sex safe again. That's a tongue twister, but it's worth saying. Let's make sex safe again by adhering to God's plan for sex. Garden sex between a married male and female, the Adam and Eve model. God bless you.